I'm so excited you guys are here because I'm opening my doors to my one-on-one coaching program, Find Your Yes, because we all deserve to live a life that feels like a hell yes. Women are leaders, and leadership is found in entrepreneurship, leading teams within a business, volunteer organizations, your community, and at home with your family. Whether you're desiring to make a transformation into leadership or you want to up-level your skills to become a more effective leader, this program is for you. I've been leading at work and at home for over a decade, and this is what I know. It wasn't until I did the inner work that I personally needed to do that my leadership skills really improved. And that's why I created the Find Your Yes program. So you don't have to do the inner work alone. As someone who has been there, I will guide you as we work through your shadows, heal past traumas, overcome self-limiting beliefs, and watch you transform from the inside out. So if you're ready to create a life that feels like a hell yes, head over to www.jessiblois.com/contact to book a call, or head over to my Instagram @jessiblois and send me a DM. I'm so excited to connect and to find your yes. I'm here with Katrina Berman, and I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because Katrina's just a fun time, and she just makes you feel happy when you're with her. Just your smile. And you're amazing and are coming on to talk about your journey to sobriety and just getting from where you were to where you are now, which is a mom of 3 beautiful children and in a successful career and everything that you've become really just so young and early in life. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me and for your sweet introduction.
Oh,
it's so nice of you.
I mean it. I mean it. Okay, so tell us a little bit about you now, and then let's kind of just dive right into childhood, your childhood.
Okay. Right now, like you said, I have 3 kids, 8, 6, and a 9-week-old.
Yeah. And she's still on the podcast.
I did not sleep last night, so we'll see how coherent this is. But I am on maternity leave right now from a career in the recovery industry, drug and alcohol treatment. I do marketing and networking for a local facility who I'm friends with the owners. And I kind of got into that after my divorce, but we'll get into that.
Okay.
My childhood, jump right in.
Just spill it all.
I'm an open book. I'll tell like a stranger in the supermarket about my childhood.
And I love that about you. I'm kind of the same way. I just figure, why not? And it helps me. I think it just breeds connection with others, which I love to connect with others. So
to me, it's authentic.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of who I am. I grew up locally also to where Jesse and I live. And I come from a super dysfunctional family. I would say most people come from some level of dysfunction, but the older I get and the more I kind of dive into the work of healing, I recognize that mine was very dysfunctional. My parents were unhappily married. I would say both abuse substances to a degree. It's kind of like they don't have a healthy relationship with substances. I'll put it that way. They didn't really have any healthy coping skills that were modeled for me. My mom was an overspender. Both my parents have unhealthy relationships with food. My dad has a pretty unhealthy response to anger. And I saw a lot of explosive anger when I was growing up. Violence never towards any of us, but like throwing things, punching holes in walls, slamming doors.
In front of you?
Oh, yeah. And oftentimes in front of our neighborhood. Like it would be in the garage or in the front yard, which was very like embarrassing and shameful to me as a kid. My parents were both yellers. That was like a normal form of communication in our home. We didn't eat at like a family dining. We ate at TV trays in front of the TV like every night of my life. We ate fast food every night for dinner because my parents both worked full time.
That was my question. Did they hold jobs?
Yeah, until they didn't. It's kind of like convoluted. My dad was a contractor when I was little, a general contractor, and he suffered an injury when I was in elementary school and was on disability through the state. My mom was the breadwinner. She worked in the banking industry for a long time until they like reversed roles. My dad went back to school through the state and rehabilitated himself and became a building inspector and like went back out into the workforce. And then around that same time, my mom like feigned a workers' comp case and stopped working and like refused to go back to work. Around the time all of that kind of happened, like prepubescence for me, like
Okay. I was gonna ask how old.
fifth grade, sixth grade.
So you're watching it, you know something's happening, but you're still not old enough to comprehend
Yeah,
fully
I
what's
was like
happening, but it
piecing stuff
feels
together.
wrong. Yeah, you know it's not good.
Yeah, my mom also had an affair around that time.
And you
And
knew about
same,
it?
yeah, they were gonna get divorced when I was in fifth grade. I can't believe I like was gonna leave this out or forgot about it. They were going to get divorced and started sleeping in separate beds when I was in fifth grade. And I would spy and like snoop and go through her stuff and read, like she had printed out emails and I would listen to her phone calls, and like pieced it together. And then they decided not to get divorced, which I later found out was financial, but it was presented as for the kids. And then they slept in separate beds until I was 18 and got divorced when I was 18 because it got like so ugly.
So, okay, so that was my question. So they stayed married and they stayed in the same house, but basically leading separate lives. And so I guess my question was, did that calm the animosity and the anger because they just went numb to each other, or it stayed
It kind of
combative?
like put kiln on the fire because they would go their own ways and get more and more resentful towards each other
Were
without
they
communicating.
were they dating?
No.
Okay. So they're just lonely at this point.
And like angry and unhappy.
And you're one of how many kids?
I have a little brother.
So you're the oldest.
Yeah. And so what have told me in therapy is that like parentify, I became the parent at, when I found out this information, I made a decision to like grow up and take care of
Yeah.
my brother.
Are you and your brother still close?
Yeah, our relationship has been through an interesting journey. So we got really close during the divorce time. We became really close because it was kind of like us versus them. And then we
Because you were
started
how old?
to,
18 and a little bit younger at that point?
even when things got bad with like my mom's mental health, I would say like middle school, high school. We
Okay.
stopped fighting. We never had sibling rivalry kind of stuff after that point. I think at some point I told my brother about my mom's affair and then we were like united.
Okay.
And then we started like using substances together. When I got sober, our relationship basically was non-existent. And then I think 2 years ago, he also got sober, and now we're super close.
That's awesome. Okay, so going back to your childhood, it's just this really unsafe, emotionally unwell environment. When I would imagine substances came in as a numbing and coping mechanism, like an escape.
Yeah.
And around what age?
I actually, by today's standards, was a bit of a late bloomer, but
Oh,
I always say like in when I share my recovery in 12-step programs, I actually like chased boys originally. It was like my first kind of coping or like looking outside myself kind of behavior, which started in middle school, which was just like, talking, I don't know, like if this person likes me, then
yeah,
I'm
like outside
valuable.
validation.
Yeah. And then when I was 15, 16, all of my friends had already started experimenting with, drinking on the weekends and smoking weed. And I was kind of the last of my friends to start. It's so funny. I read my speech at Dare graduation. I was like really scared by Dare. I it kept me from trying anything for a long time. But I started around 15 or 16, and I'll never forget like the first time I was just like, oh, this is how you do life. Like in this consciousness, I can like go home to my parents. I can be comfortable socially. I don't feel like all the things that I feel on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah, I can start
you know.
feeling all the uncomfortableness. Were your parents, Katrina, like I know it was compatible between them and they had anger and substance abuse issues, but were they loving towards you and your brother, or it was all aspects of your childhood, they just weren't available?
I would say, you know, not that they weren't loving, they were not loving the way that like I'm loving to my kids. They weren't present. I try to put in perspective for my kids the kind of parent I am versus I'm pretty open with them about the kind of childhood that I had. And I kind of chalk it up to like neglect. My parents were very neglectful and like unavailable. I am around my kids all the time. I just don't remember, like I don't know where my parents were, but they weren't like entertaining me or engaging with me or even like making my lunches or
Really?
oh yeah, I had hot lunch every day of my life. They told me they loved me, they hugged me when I was sick. I slept in my mom's bed, some of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that they were capable
Uh-huh.
of
They were maybe in too much
loving me.
pain.
Yeah, the way that I think a child like deserves to be loved and
Yeah.
needs to be loved for healthy development.
Yeah. Absolutely. Are they still in your life today?
Unfortunately, not in really a meaningful way. I actually don't speak to my mom. I haven't in over a year. She hasn't met my baby. And my dad, we see here and there, but like I said, it's not very meaningful.
Yeah. It's so I want to go back to your childhood and I'll touch on this and we can come back to it, but you've really made a conscious choice to be a generational cycle breaker, which I've
Yeah.
experienced with as well. There's certain parts of my childhood that I did not want to bring into my own children's childhood. And for anybody that's been lucky enough to not have to break generational cycles, I will say it's extremely painful and it's extremely hard. And especially if the rest of your family isn't viewing things the way you are, or doesn't see the toxicity or the need to break the cycle, you're surely pinpointed as the bitch, right? Like something's wrong with you that you're saying, like, I don't want a part of this. This doesn't work for me. For me, I knew I needed to make changes when my kids got of age where they're watching, they're listening, and it's in front of them. And I just have flashbacks to like seeing certain things in my childhood and thinking, oh, no, 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 no. Like I definitely like we're not repeating this pattern. And I don't want the relationship with my kids that, I may have with a parent. But I just want to commend you because I think it's one of those things that you don't know what it really feels like unless you've lived through it. And I know there's nothing easy about it. It's just I don't have another option kind of internal feeling.
Thank you. That is one of the reasons I don't have a relationship with my mom is because I am like the aggressor to her. And in response to like the sentiment of what you're saying, people, in talking about my story or like in therapy or recovery, when
Mm-hmm.
people want to give me some kind of like credit or like you said, I commend you. I always liken it to like running out of a burning building. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you don't congratulate the person like, good job for running out. It's like I did not see another option.
Yeah, like it had to be this way because I know what happens if I stay. And that's
Yeah.
just, especially as a mom, right? It's not even about us. It's about what are we showing them? What are we exposing them to? What is the life and the future we're creating for them? What patterns are we telling them are okay? And then you're just like, well, yeah, I gotta run, gotta go.
Yeah, that's really when everything turned for me with my family of origin, was when I had kids.
Okay, so let's go back to your childhood a little bit. So you started using like marijuana and alcohol around 15. That was kind of the
Yeah,
intro.
15, 16. Yeah. And
Okay.
I would say it looked normal to me. Whoever's parents were out of town in school, we would go to their house and drink at their house. Someone's older brother would get us whatever, and
Yeah.
it looked like what all my other friends were doing until it didn't. And then I kind of gravitated towards the kids that were doing it after school on weekdays also. And then I'm doing it before I go to school and when I leave for lunch. And I
So you
was
kind
just
of
getting
transition
exercised.
friend groups?
A lot of my friends, yeah, well, I would say like I had multiple friends groups. And then at a certain point, I was just hanging out with the people who were doing what I was doing.
Okay.
Like I stopped, I quit cheerleading. I stopped hanging out with some of my longest friends who were like prioritizing school and
Mhm.
their sports, and stuck with the kids that were just focused on what I was focused on.
And were your parents aware?
Not for a long time. Eventually, they when they became aware, there was a certain like freedom in my house once I was a certain age, I guess, where I don't want to say they didn't care, but like I was allowed to. Was the message I received.
Did they know
Was
you were
like,
doing it before school though, and in the middle of the day and after school?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. At a certain point, it was just like accepted that like I smoked weed and drank alcohol.
I guess my question actually is like, if you were stopping school activities and if did your grades suffer, did they pay attention to like did anybody say like, hey, what's happening in this
This
class?
is a problem. Yeah, unfortunately, no. By that point, my parents' marriage was like on the brink of
Okay.
divorce. My mom also went through a depressive episode when I was in high school where she was in bed at like around the clock, which I later found out was due to her own substance abuse. And
Were there
so
outside adults helping your parents or your family?
at this point, my parents had lost any kind of like friendships that they had with neighbors or just like, I don't know. I think about my life versus my parents' life,
Yeah.
and like my mom didn't have mom friends.
Yeah.
Um,
Did she have parents around? Did you have grandparents or aunts and uncles that
no,
were kind of checking in?
they my parents weren't close with their parents. We would see
Okay.
them for holidays. I would say my dad was closer with his parents, but they lived like an hour and a half away. And yeah, we just weren't very close with them.
So no one, if your mom's having a depressive episode,
I had to like find rides for us to school.
yeah, so no one's stepping in to help you and your dad's not helping. So it's literally like you are going to take care of her or you're going to take care of you. No one's taking care of you and your brother.
Yeah. My dad, I think, thought that he was doing the best that he could, but he was working around the clock, basically, probably to not be home, I would imagine. So he was at work all the time. And then my brother and I just kind of had like free reign. I spent a lot of time at friends' houses.
Okay. Did you have families there that were nurturing or because they
Yeah,
were, you did?
that's what I like looked for.
Okay. That's nice. Did your brother have the same thing?
My brother at this point in our lives kind of had an unhealthy dependence on my mom, or like codependence with my mom.
Yeah.
But when he got into high school, was running around with his friends too.
Did
Not
you guys share friends?
sometimes just in the sake of like people, when people are like smoking weed, it's like we're all friends.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's something else to say about it, right? Because at some point, yeah, the whatever substance it is a form of numbing those feelings, escape, but it's also an immediate built-in community.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. You're not trying to keep up with friendships with friends who have a support system at home and have parents that are actively involved, right? Because I mean, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine as a child, if you're still with that original group of friends and they have different circumstances at home, that's painful. Whether you know it's painful or not, something feels shitty inside. So it's easier to
Yeah, and
gravitate elsewhere.
I couldn't like do what I was doing around them.
Right.
If that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this kind of takes you through high school and then what did
I get into before I graduate, I get into prescription drugs.
how did you get them?
My mom had like a pharmacy under her bed.
Okay.
Yeah. Like
Just
different benzos, pain meds, just a whole. This was in the early 2000s, like 2004. I graduated 07, so it was before kind of this like attack on big pharma where
mhm.
we just didn't know what was going to happen with pain meds, and they were just handing out scripts like, my mom got these prescriptions from our family physician, and she
Wait, and
had.
then so her medication's disappearing and she just thinks she's taking it and goes and gets more?
Yeah, and I guess I wasn't taking like enough to where she noticed,
Yeah.
or she was also so heavily medicated that
Yeah.
she didn't know if she took them or I took them, you know.
Okay. So I don't mean to sound naive, but I never have really had a conversation with somebody that was medicating through prescription pills. Are you functioning? Does it take you out of, were you at the point where you weren't going to school and you weren't functioning in
No, I could
day-to-day life?
totally function. You eventually like build a tolerance. But I wasn't taking copious amounts because I didn't want to get caught stealing her meds. So it would be like a couple of a certain, or like a combination of, one or two things. It's honestly surprising to me that school didn't, but I'm going to school, I'm doing assignments, and then eventually I manipulated my way into independent study, and I was like an honors AP student. I could have gone to a good school if I hadn't kind of stopped. I didn't even take my SATs because I just didn't care. The progression was I like dropped down to CP classes, and then I manipulated my way onto independent study. And independent study is like, you do these packets for credits and you meet with a teacher once a week and they sign off on your credits. And I would use a stimulant and complete a bunch of packets. And then I finished my credits like early my senior year.
So what were you doing during the day? Were you with
Hanging
other?
I was hanging out with kids who, not kids, I was hanging out with adults. I was hanging out with people who had graduated high school and did drugs. And I actually used to hang out like in a drug dealer's house all the time.
And nobody knew. No adults in your life.
Oh, my parents, my mom put my drug dealer on our cell phone plan,
Okay.
but she didn't know he was a drug dealer.
Right. She thought he was your
Yeah,
friend?
yeah, at a certain point, he crashed at our house for a period of time and like slept on my floor.
Was he a
This
boyfriend?
is so crazy to say. No, he was not my boyfriend. I called him like a big brother, but he was a drug dealer, and it's one of the sources that I got my drugs from.
Your parents never, it didn't red flag them that you went from AP classes to, I'm just trying to understand.
I honestly, recounting this to you, this is not something that I like get into so much detail with on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis. Looking at it as a mom is like baffling. This guy was I was 17 at the time, and this guy was like 20 something. And yeah, I don't
I
know.
mean, I wrote a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And there was a portion of the book that really stood out to me. And it aligned that we're all born clean, like nothing's happened to us, right? And then throughout life, we get wounds that turn into scars. There is a way to get rid of those painful scars, but that's through self-reflection, a lot of inner work. And really, I mean, that stuff's uncomfortable and it's hard and it takes time and it's yucky. Those of us that are willing to do that work can clear out those wounds. Those of us that don't do that work are always wounded. So if we have parents that never were able to self-reflect and do hard work on themselves, we have wounded adults, children, whatever, raising us.
That's which I have also done recovery in a program called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional
Okay.
Families.
Okay.
So very similar concept. And it's when you talk about breaking generational patterns, it's, my parents had parents who were the same way or unhealthy in some degree. And they had parents who were unhealthy in some degree. I also think in generations prior, just they didn't know what we know about mental health and boundaries and parenting, and there's so much science now that supports healing and the way we interact with children, family members, partners. I really think, my parents' generation didn't have the same opportunity that we did. But 100%, my parents are wounded people. And when you wander through life wounded, you develop ways to like protect your wounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it really, I mean, I don't know your parents and we've only talked a little bit about the story, but when you're hurting that much, I mean, I don't know, to have to stop and think, oh my God, she was in AP classes and now she's doing independent study. And who's this 20-year-old sleeping on their floor? Like, if they were going to open that door, like things were going to flood through that they were going to have to deal with.
Yeah, the level of kind of just denial, really. I mean, when I got sober, my parents were like, well, my dad specifically was like, oh, I didn't really even think you had a problem. Meanwhile, I've like totaled 6 cars and am around the clock, drinker and substance user by the age of 21. It's like, what? You didn't think I had a problem?
Yeah, but denial, right? Because if you're not seeing it, it can't hurt you.
And to recognize that, he would have to recognize some responsibility as a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to see your child suffering, I mean, for me, if I saw my child suffering in a way where I could intervene and help and I didn't, that would feel like a parental failure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so loaded. It's so easy for us to hold our parents responsible. And they are responsible for a lot of their choices, but they're also just really sad, wounded people. Not all of them, but some of them. And I remember too, like they were a little kid, right? And they didn't get the love that they needed. Unfortunately, they didn't try to make themselves better for us. And now we have to make decisions. It's very complicated.
I think the shift that came for me from, all the work that I've done in therapy and ACA was like, yeah, my parents did the best that they could, and it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And I can see them as like hurt and wounded people and hold them accountable for their behavior now.
I love that you're using and instead of but.
Both are true.
Yeah, it's intentional that it's an and instead of but. I couldn't agree with you more, just from my own journey and learning what boundaries I've needed to set. It's not even a place, because I think my siblings have struggled with like, why are you being such a bitch? Right? I think that's kind of where we're at right now. It's not that I'm trying to be mad at anyone or hurt anyone or shame anyone. It's just, this is what's happening. And this is the type of life I'm trying to create and the type of humans I'm trying to raise. And somehow it doesn't like fully mesh. And my kids still see my parents and I still see my parents, and it's all still great. But the enmeshment that we had, and it's totally different issues that we've had in our family versus your family, but just the communication style and the way we all interact, it's like, and this isn't what I want to create in my own home.
Totally.
I love the and. I'm going to start using more of that and. Okay, so you're in high school, you're graduating. What did you do after high school? Did you go to school? Did you get a job? What were your next steps?
Yeah, I would work like whatever jobs you work when you're 18. Actually the big one at this time was I worked at Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yeah.
I worked at Abercrombie and Hollister
Hollister, yeah.
for a really long time to get to this like lead stock. Like I worked in the back room, and I got a lead position basically just because I stayed there long enough. And I registered in, the local community college because at the time you had to be enrolled in college to stay on your parents' insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time, I'm also getting meds from my family practitioner. So I need to be able to see him. I need to be able to, get my prescriptions.
So many adults failed you in realizing what you were doing.
Yeah, it's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah, it was just like by this point, I've been in several car accidents. And so I had legitimate pain.
Okay.
And then I kind of feigned anxiety.
Well, I'm sure you did have anxiety if you weren't on a drug.
Yeah, but I was med seeking.
Yeah.
And I didn't want like the kind of pharmaceutical options that would, heal my brain or like help me cope with life better. I wanted the ones that would numb me out.
Mm-hmm. Were the car accidents you were driving?
Yeah.
How did you keep getting cars? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. It's a lot of people in 12-step recovery have these like crazy stories where I don't know how I've never had a DUI. I drove through a brick wall like
And you
down the
didn't get
street
a
from my
DUI?
parents. Nope. It was the morning after a party and I should not have been driving. I was actually driving on my first day to college, community college, and I drove through a brick wall.
Were you really hurt?
No, this is like the thing that keeps me from facing consequences is I'm like invincible. I think I'm invincible. As at 18, I hit my nose on the steering wheel and it wasn't even like I didn't even break my nose. And my mom came to the scene of the crime and was removing my like paraphernalia in front of police officers. And police came to they were like, "Oh yeah, make sure you get everything because it's gonna go to the junkyard or whatever, and you don't want to go there." A policeman came to the hospital to see if I was okay. My blood alcohol content wasn't tested, and nothing happened.
That's incredible. It makes no sense. I hope things are different for
It's concerning. Yeah,
our children's
for sure.
generation. Oh, for sure. It's concerning.
Yeah. I would venture to say that things are not the same way.
I sure hope not.
This was in 2007, so
And we're
I'm
supposed to
aging
feel like
myself,
that's a long time
but
ago, right?
isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's
Anything with the
16 wait,
2000s feels like it was yesterday, but I know it wasn't.
it's 16 years ago.
I know, but it doesn't feel that long ago.
I have
I
to double check
know.
my math.
It's just wild. No. Your math is correct. It is a long time ago.
I know. To me, I'm still like 20, and it was 2 years ago.
Oh, for sure. When my kids are like, "Mom, stop! You're embarrassing." I'm like, "Hold on. Who are you calling mom? And what do you mean I'm embarrassing?" And Sydney, my daughter, said to me the other day, "Back in your day, what was she talking about? Something about phones. Like you didn't even have a cell phone. How did you do this?" And I thought, "Holy hell! Like I'm here now."
Yeah,
I'm a little older.
my daughter's the same way. She's embarrassed. I try to tell her that I'm actually a cool mom. When I was a kid, I had an older mom. And so I feel like my mom actually was embarrassing. But I'm like, I'm actually kind of like, I'm not that lame, but
So
she
our
doesn't
daughters are the
agree.
same age, and I'm 7 years older than you, but I know in their eyes we're the
A
same.
100. Yeah.
Yeah, we're both 100. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. I started
Um,
young.
okay, so you're kind of getting through life, but you got sober young. I mean,
Yeah. So you
you
asked about
started young, but
after.
you got sober young. So what was that moment? Like why? Why at 21, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There was like a series of events that led up to, I kind of started doing this dance with 12-step recovery. Um,
Because you didn't feel good or
no, I had my best friend, I would say like my partner in crime, she got pregnant and we were using like for a majority of her pregnancy, not
okay.
knowing that she was pregnant. And
Okay.
so she got sent to treatment. And that was the first thing that made me look at like, oh, I thought I was much worse than her. So I felt like if she had a problem, then I should probably like evaluate that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she got out of rehab, I went to meetings with her. That was my first. Oh, I'm going to back it up. That was the
Okay.
first time I chose to go to 12-step recovery. This is an interesting plot twist. My parents, my mom started attending Al Anon
Oh,
because of my brother.
because of your
Um,
brother. I thought you were going to say your dad.
no, because of my brother. When
Oh,
I had graduated and it was right after that car accident where I drove through the brick wall. I'm currently living at home. I go to a job and I don't show up for school. So like I found out very quickly when you go to college, they don't do anything if you don't show up. And so
yeah.
I never
Oh,
showed
yeah.
up and I got to keep my health insurance. My mom
Mm.
starts going to Al Anon through the high school where I went and where my brother still went at the time. And then my brother starts going to 12-step meetings. They had these like this group at the school like one night a week where the parents would go do like an Al-Anon
The
style.
high school?
Yeah.
Wow. Who
And
flagged your
then
brother that he needed help?
I guess my mom, this is A long time ago, and B, I'm under the influence most of the time
Okay.
at this time.
Okay.
Um, And so then I was lumped in kind of, and my parents started to like take note of what was going on a little bit more and get a little bit more involved. That was my first introduction to 12-step recovery. I wanted nothing to do with it because I had already graduated and the kids were in high school. I was
Yeah.
like, well, I'm an adult. You guys shouldn't be partying the way that I do or whatever.
Yeah.
I found the differences. Then my next kind of thing was my friend got sober. And then the next few times I went back like on my own accord
I mean, you were
until
really young to make a really big decision for yourself and a huge life change.
luckily the seed had been planted where like I knew where to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you and your friend go on the sober journey together?
No, at the time she didn't stay sober. And neither did I. And then she had a baby. So it was like our lives went in two different directions. And then I think I got sober and she continued to struggle with sobriety. So we just lost touch. But there was no monumental like outside circumstance the
Uh-huh.
time that I ended up getting sober. And I didn't know that it would be the time I got sober, like knock on wood. But I had one more blackout in like put myself in a situation that I shouldn't have been in, and
Mhm.
I woke up and I hit what they call in the room in recovery like an emotional bottom. You know, I've never been arrested. I still had a car, I still had a license, I had a place to live, I had a full-time job. My mom at the time called it my first big girl job. So none of
Was
that, all of
it the
that stuff,
lead at Abercrombie?
no.
Oh,
At this time, I was working at a CPA firm, like
oh,
Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, kind of doing personal assistant, like receptionist kind of thing, but
Okay.
it was a big deal for me to have office hours at that age
Yeah.
and a significantly higher income than I had probably ever had. But I woke up like one morning and I was just like, I hated myself sober, and it stopped working. Like I hated myself when I was under the influence.
It lost its allure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just went back to another meeting and did like what's suggested in 12-step recovery.
How hard was that initial journey? Was it something that you're like, I'm going to be sober and that's it? Like, I'm not going back. I'm not looking back. Or was it a daily struggle? Like,
It's a
were you
big,
teetering on a line?
yeah, a big, I think like a well-known phrase is one day at a time. And it really is like that. Like I said, I didn't know that I was going to be done forever. And even now I don't say forever, because I know people with decades of sobriety that relapse. At the time, I was really scared to get loaded again. I thought that my experience had shown that it was a matter of if not when. Like I knew eventually I would be uncomfortable. I would have a lapse in judgment. I would forget the consequences. My only experience was that after any period of sobriety, I would eventually pick up again. And so it was just like, I'm going to do this day and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah. Is that the same today? Or has that changed? Do you
No, I
feel,
don't think about at that time it's kind of like this ongoing like internal struggle where I'm like just hanging on for dear life.
yeah,
And then the reason why I believe 12-step recovery works is you work the 12 steps and experience like a shift in personality, or they call it a spiritual experience, a psychic change, something, you heal in a way. I healed in a way that allowed me to stop seeking outside relief. And so now I don't think about drinking or doing drugs.
so you feel more settled in your sobriety over time. It's not something that well, you mentioned like
Constantly
people
battling
are
with.
sober for decades and then they go back or they have a
Yeah, so it's
relapse.
kind of hard to explain to like someone who doesn't have the experience of 12-step recovery, but a good analogy is exercise and health and fitness. So it takes like a period of time to start, you start eating healthy, exercising, get into whatever kind of shape you're trying to get into, and then you have to maintain that, right? Like
Yeah.
you continue to go to the gym and you continue to eat healthy. And what is suggested in 12-step recovery through the 12-step process is continued growth and a continued practice of like a spiritual way of life and principles. And I've seen people stop doing that, and that's when relapse happens, or when you're a prey to kind of that possibility. And
Yeah.
I've had times in my sobriety, really really dark times, where I wasn't, we call it working a program, where I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, kind of like, you know not exercising, and then the scale starts to go up. If I'm not practicing what I'm supposed to be practicing, the thought of a drink starts showing up more,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would love to know what are some of the practices that they either like present to you or that you seek out, but what are some of the healing practices that you start incorporating into your life to heal?
Yeah, I think something that we say in 12-step recovery is that everyone could benefit from the steps.
Well, yeah, that's what I want to know.
There are hundreds of 12-step programs for different, Alcoholics Anonymous is probably the most famous or well known. but there's Gamblers Anonymous, Shoppers Anonymous, Sex and Love like there is every kind of behavior because of this process. And so what it basically is, without getting like too into the nitty-gritty of it, is a decision to subscribe to a higher power. You know, that can be whatever you choose, a god, an energy, spirit, universal, whatever is, you know, relevant to the individual. And then an inventory, which is like an analysis of my behavior. The first time you do it, it's really an analysis of my behavior my whole life. But we get there by looking at my relationship with other people. So I start with like why I'm angry at my mom. And then what I get to is what I've done in the relationship. We go over that with another person. We look at ways that we can do better. And then that becomes the practice of like seeking that higher power and that energy, like being connected to what I think that energy would want for me, or like how it would want me to behave, the kind of woman that I think it would want me to be. And then continuing the self-analysis. So daily analysis of my behavior. And when I skipped the amends part, you do like a after the first big inventory, you go out and make amends basically for like your whole life, anyone that you've caused harm to. And then the daily analysis leads to sometimes daily amends, or like responsibility for my behavior. Present.
You're not just playing the victim
time.
role. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the victim role is what kept me drinking.
Right.
I always said, if you had parents like mine, if you had a life like mine, if you know, would it fill in the blank, then you would anesthetize too. And it's really about taking responsibility for my feelings and my actions and like my life.
Yeah. Did they give you like, do they encourage, or do you seek it on your own, like walking daily, exercise, journaling, meditation, or they're
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff falls into like the way an individual chooses to seek their higher power. And I've explored like all of that in the course of my sobriety. There have been times, you know, I see a like I call her like a meditation lady, and she teaches me about meditation. And there's been times where I've gotten up at 4 o'clock in the morning and like chanted in Sanskrit for an hour and a half. I got certified in yoga instruction. There was a period of time where I was going to church, like all different. I've read a bunch of different spiritual books. And the great part about 12-step recovery, and I think why it is kind of a one size fits all approach, is that the individual gets to decide. And the literature is very clear that it does not subscribe to any one kind of theology.
Yeah.
So
they kind of give you a guide for your path, but they don't tell you how to fill that path.
Yeah. My current, I would say, like practices, I love meditation. I have been getting into cold showers. I'll jump in the pool in the morning. Walking. I've always really loved walking because it's just so simple and like accessible.
And the sun.
Yeah.
I think there's something
vitamin D.
There's something really healing about feeling a breeze, but more so the sun.
Yeah, grounding, just like being outside. Even sometimes if I'm anxious, I'll just walk barefoot in my grass outside. Yoga. I love hot yoga when I can get to it.
I just started yoga for the first time. I mean, I did like Peloton yoga in my garage alone. But I just started going to
it. What? Don't negate it. Don't negate it. That counts.
Well, I didn't know if I was doing it right. Like sometimes my back would hurt and I'd be like, well, I probably did that all wrong. But I was always too intimidated to go into a yoga studio.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent for my own kids that you can do hard things. And if you want to get somewhere in life, you have to just take the next step. You can't just quit and walk away. We're really big on that. So I thought, well, shit, Jesse, you better go into that yoga studio. And
Anytime you want to go.
well, oh my gosh, you're going to come with me because I now go every week. And when I tell you that I am so happy, I face that fear. I love it. And I never, ever, ever, ever thought I would be the person that wanted to do yoga. But I absolutely love it. I do. There's something just really, I'm really into anything right now that kind of takes me out of my mind and can quiet everything.
Physical practices. You know, yoga was developed as a means to meditation, to quiet the mind, exhaust the body to quiet the mind, basically.
Exhaust the body to quiet the mind. That makes a lot of sense. You know, it's interesting because even when I do Peloton in my garage, that's where I work out, but even when I do strength training or whatever, it doesn't quiet the mind for some reason. Maybe because they're talking on the video or you're still able to rest in between sets, but the mind keeps going. But there is something really beautiful about yoga where you really have to be paying attention or you're going to fall over.
Yeah, it's very present. And the connection, a lot of teachers will connect breath to movement, which it's like built-in breath work.
Yeah, we'll have to talk. I'll have to tell you where I'm going and you tell me where you like to go. That's cool. Yeah, no, I've loved it. So you've really sought out lots of different modalities. These are things that I did for myself too, a handful of years back when I just felt so broken and lost. And I thought like, it has to feel better than this. Like this can't be what I'm going to do forever. It was seeking out just all sorts of different modalities to help me find just like that inner calm, just a little bit of calm in the angst of everything. I guess I was fortunate to not also have this like other big picture, and I've never had to go on a path of sobriety, but I can relate, like especially during COVID and as a business owner, small business during COVID, there was a lot of drinking happening in my house to get by.
I think I really love the sort of sober curious or like trending sobriety for
it's really big right now.
Yeah, that is prevalent in our culture. I think it's great. And the science that supports sobriety just for health. I'm all for it. I think it's really cool.
I think it is healthy, and it's a conversation I'm having a lot with my girlfriends too. I don't know if it's because it's trending or if it's our age or if it's all of the above, but there's something around when I turned 39, 40, where I used to love that glass of wine at the end of the night. And what I miss is that feeling of like, oh, I'm going to have a glass of wine. And then the feeling of like relaxing as I had that glass of wine. But I know I don't even want it because I know how shitty I'm going to feel when I wake up. So it couldn't be enjoyable anymore, if that makes sense. Like I don't drink during the week. Sometimes I'll drink when I go out with girlfriends, but we even just went away with a family for a few days and we were like, do we even want to drink? Like it just doesn't hit the same way to have one or two drinks because how you said it lost its allure. Even social drinking at this point is losing its allure because I mean, maybe just age alone, but like I don't wake up feeling how I want to feel. And then you're not the mom you want to be, you're not exercising, you're not starting your day on the right foot. I don't sleep through the night when I drink. A lot of times I'll wake up. So I think it really does start to really breed that sober curious lifestyle. And then you're seeing it, everywhere right now.
I also think the more it makes sense to me, the more that you do like healing work, like you want to be present and you are more present, and then you're more cognizant of how it actually makes you feel.
Yeah. That's actually a great point because it has all aligned. I can recognize more instead of like when I would always just feel anxiety. A lot of that healing work, you're able to get a little bit of a grip on it and manage it better. And I know when I'm drinking, especially if I drink, that anxiety it's common. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to experience it. Like, there's nothing,
Yeah,
you're
it seems
gonna.
kind of like a natural progression.
Yeah, no, you're right. It really does. Okay, so you became sober super early in your 20s, and then you ended up starting your family, and you have your beautiful children. And did you then naturally progress into the career you have now of being in the recovery world?
Yes and no. A lot of people, when they get sober, work in treatment. That's like a very natural progression. I worked in treatment kind of until I got pregnant and had my first child. And then coincidentally, when my daughter was little, my ex-husband became super successful. And so I had always wanted to stay home with my kids, and we like made that decision where I would stay home. I would not have thought that I would go back to the treatment industry. Direct client care, where you're actually like working with clients, is super taxing, and there's a high rate of burnout.
Yeah.
And so I was like, after the divorce, I would not have considered going back into direct client care, but this was like just a kind of coincidental lucky turn of events where a good friend of mine owns the facility that I work for, and at the time the supervisor that hired me was also a good friend that I got sober with, and they kind of presented it to me like a marketing opportunity where I wouldn't be directly working with clients necessarily, just on the front end. And I would manage our relationships with other facilities. I go to a lot of events, host events for our facility, and it sounded appealing to me. So I jumped back into the industry, and that's how I kind of ended up here.
That's great. And what now? I mean, forget that. Not what now. You have a
I don't know.
Nothing now. Sleep is all that is now.
Yeah, we'll see. I did meet my current partner in doing, working. He does the same thing that I do. And I
then
actually
he moved out here, right? He wasn't, you've told me, I think, but was he came out here
at
for
the
you.
time. Yeah. We met at a work dinner in Mexico.
And then here you are.
Yeah,
sleeping.
and now we have a baby,
adorable
and I
newborn.
never sleep. I actually have a meeting with my employer this afternoon to see what the future holds.
It's exciting. Well, I thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey, because I knew like you had a sobriety journey, but I didn't know the details of it. So I mean, it's incredible, and it takes a lot of introspection. I don't know if that's a word. Introspective thinking. And hard work to stay.
Is a word.
I mean, maybe not. I don't know. But to stay and do this path and commit, sobriety or not, like self inner work and healing is a big journey. So then you add sobriety on top of that. And I mean, like I said at the beginning, you're just to be around you is happy energy. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I feel the same way about you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on and for sharing your story. I really, really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.